going to complete failure can actually do harm on testosterone levels, primarily due to elevated cortisol.
Yeah, and I might argue that based off of overall training volume, right? Like for me right now, when I go into the gym, I only do 2 sets per lift, but I'm going basically 2 RPE 9 or RPE 10 on every set that I do. So,
and RPE is
rate of perceived exertion. So the RPE scale, RPE 10 is I'm standing there with a gun to your head, your life depended on it, and you could not possibly have exerted any more life force into completing that set. RPE 9 is 1 rep away from that, RPE 8 is 2 reps away from that, so on and so on and so on, right? So, really famous bodybuilder Dorian Yates, he famously only did like 1 set per exercise, but he would go until he could not do anything else. So I think, in terms of the actual mechanisms that drive hypertrophy, there's still a lot of gray area in terms of like what the secret combination is that is going to get you the best possible result. For me, it makes sense that if you are driving a fuck ton of effort on your lifts, as long as you're dialing back the overall volume that you're doing, I don't think that would hurt your testosterone levels. I think it might actually be better for them.
So on this note, let's talk about sets and reps. Obviously the answer is it depends, but are there general guidelines? Like I was under the assumption, still am under the assumption, unless you can provide new evidence, that in general, sets between 10 and 15 reps are optimal for hypertrophy, as long as you're saying they're within that RPE 8 or 7 of perceived exertion.
Yeah. I'm really glad we're diving into this because that's completely false.
Okay.
Research has shown that you can get equal hypertrophy benefit anywhere in the 5 rep range to the 30 rep range.
For hypertrophy specifically?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, if we're talking strength focused, we want to be below 5 reps.
Right.
And if you're below 5 reps, you're not going to be getting much of a stimulus for hypertrophy. Okay, but if we're between 5 on the low end and 30 on the high end, you can create hypertrophy. And the main dictator of whether or not that will happen is, are you hitting the required intensity or stimulus? Right? Like, think about it this way. Your brain isn't counting your rep. Your pec, when you're doing bench press,
doesn't care about the numbers.
It's not like, I'm not going to grow until we get to the 10th rep, right? Like, we hit 10, okay, I'm going to grow.
Yeah.
It's simply responding to stress. And the way that volume is calculated most often now is sets per week. Sets per muscle group per week. Because whether or not you're going to do 5 reps or 15 reps, the end destination should be the same. In terms of you getting to that rep where you're like you're really fighting it, right? So if all roads lead to that, that's what we're actually going for, is that dogfight of a rep where you're grinding through it. That's the stimulus that's going to lead to growth. Now, other things do matter, like volume matters, but again, volume isn't really equated or measured in the way that you were talking about where we're counting reps. It's effective sets per week. So how many working sets are we doing per muscle group per week?
Gotcha.
And in terms of the right number to do with that, anywhere from 8 sets per muscle group per week all the way up to 15 or 20, depending on a whole bunch of stuff. Obviously, if someone is anabolically enhanced, that they can handle a lot more volume. So training age is super relevant. How hard are you actually pushing on your sets is super relevant too. So what I found for me is, as my training age has increased, as I've become more advanced in the gym, and I therefore have more control over my nervous system, and I can push way fucking harder on those lifts, I can actually handle less overall volume now, because I'm able to go so deep and bring on so much stress in each set that I do that my body can't tolerate the total volume that I was doing before at the intensity that I can now drive.
Gotcha.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. Glad we clarified that. So a follow-up question to that: can you build muscle on lower weights? Like if you were to do lower weights at the high repetition range, let's do a hypothetical.
Yeah.
Hypothetically, if you were to do lower weight up into the 30 rep range,
Yeah.
or heavier weight into the lower 5 rep range,
Yeah.
can you still build the same amount of muscle?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, but there are certain exercises lend themselves better to higher reps or lower reps. Like I never prescribe really going above 15 reps. I don't see a point to it, and I think there actually is a detriment to you just doing more work than you need to. Like if you can get the same benefit in 10 reps, and we know that, then what's the fucking point in going to 30 unless you just like want to spend 3 hours in the gym, right? So for that reason, I never program above 15 reps ever, really. And yeah, the benefits, you can get equal muscle growth in either end of that rep range, and some exercises will lend themselves better to higher reps or lower reps. So a good example would be something like a cable shoulder raise, like a cable delt raise. You can't really handle much load there. Like at the very most, you'll go up to like 30. If you're strong, maybe if you're super strong, you'll do like 30 or 40 or 35 or 40. As a result of that, I'm gonna bias in the direction of more reps for an exercise like that, just because it's weaker. It doesn't make sense to try and really load up the weight to get into that like 5 or 6 or 7 rep range. But other exercises like a hack squat or RDL or something, I would be fine with loading up with more weight and using a lower rep number, because of the fact that that area of tissue can tolerate load in a much better way than something like a delt can.
Got it. Okay.
And another good thing to do is just variation, just so you don't get bored in the gym. Like if we know that when you're doing incline dumbbell press, it doesn't really matter if you're doing 15 reps, 12 reps, or 10 reps, or 8 reps, or 6 reps. Let's vary through that so that you get it. You can have a novel experience, and it's not from this standpoint of like, oh, it's muscle confusion. That's not what's happening. It's just more fun for you when you're not doing the same fucking weight at the same rep scheme all the time.
Is muscle confusion like changing the
Exercise
apparatus that you use,
No.
or the timing that you use, or there's so many different things that you could do, from time of day to temperature that you train to one of my favorites is like switching out dumbbells for kettlebells, for example. Does that play an important role in breaking a plateau?
No, not at all. So the idea of muscle confusion, in that like you're training one pattern and your body gets used to it, so then you confuse it with a new pattern, is going to lead to a better outcome. It's not true, and if anything, that actually is counterproductive for you building strength and building muscle. One of the primary focuses of an effective program is specificity. If you're going into the gym and one day you're doing incline bicep curls, the other day you're doing cable bicep curls, the other day you're doing hammer, like you're just doing everything different every day. We're constantly changing the stimulus that your body's trying to adapt to. Therefore, the lack of specificity could actually be detrimental to the muscle growth and strength that we're trying to build. So what we typically do with programming is we'll operate in like a 12 to 16 week block, where the exercise selection basically stays the same unless there's like an injury or something about the program isn't working for a particular client, then we can change it. But barring anything like that, we'll stay with the same exercise selection for the most part for a 12 to 16 week block. And then after that block, we'll make some changes, but not from the standpoint of muscle confusion. Like we're not going to surprise the muscle into doing something else. It's more, we've accumulated a lot of stress in the shortened position of your pec or whatever the particular area that we're focusing on in that program is. Let's go ahead and have a different focus for the next 12 to 16 week block.
So that's what I more meant, is not like on a weekly basis changing it up, but more over a prolonged period of time, because I'm blanking on the specific name for this, but I know, for example, if you were to only do push-ups, your body gets more efficient at doing push-ups, and therefore you burn less calories. I'm not familiar if that has an impact on muscle building. You're saying that doesn't have an effect on muscle building.
Well,
Like if you were to only do like 3 movements like for the rest of your life, as long as you have progressive overload, you're saying that you can still continue to build muscle.
oh yeah, you'll get really fucking strong in those movements. But then there's also the point of like, you probably have some other things you want to work on too, right? Does someone just want to have big shoulders, big arms, and big triceps? Or do they also want to have a big chest, a big back, big lats, big glutes, big quads, there's a lot going on in the human body. So with that, we can't ever make everything the priority all at once. So I like to think of it as like a pyramid where we're like going from one corner up a little bit to the other corner, then up a little bit to the other corner, and we're like kind of making our way around the pyramid as we slightly change the focus every 12 to 16 week block.
Gotcha.